Coming up on the Empowered Woman podcast.
To me, an empowered woman is someone who knows herself. She is confident in who she is. She's constantly curious about the world. Her intent always is to create a better world, supportive of people around her, 0% interested in cutting down people in the effort of going what they want.
Welcome to the Empowered Woman podcast, the #1 show on visibility strategies for women entrepreneurs. If you want to get empowered to be seen, stand out on social media, stages, TV, and more to make an impact with your voice and business, you're in the right place. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Marcia Spurk, and I'm your host, professional singer and visibility strategist. Welcome again, and let's dive into today's episode. One thing I don't talk about enough is the impact podcasting has had on my professional life and how it opened so many doors for me. So if you want to start a podcast or you want to level up your current one, then you need to work with my podcast strategist, Juliana Barbati. She owns a podcast marketing and production agency, and her team takes care of everything from editing and optimizing to scheduling for you, making this process a breeze for you. She's seriously the best. All her info is in the show notes. You can go to julianabarbati.com and tell her I sent you. Hey, neurodivergent entrepreneur. Do you feel overwhelmed and exhausted by your to-do list? Well, it's not your fault. Increase your ease, impact, and income by learning to work with the way you were wired. Take the Intensities quiz right now to understand more about yourself, get strength-based tips, and join free virtual support calls to tackle challenging tasks. Go to intensityhub.com right now to get started. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Marta. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I am as well. Always fun to connect with another empowered woman, empowering women out there, especially in the topic of money making. So I am super excited to hear about what you do, how you got started, and how you support women. So tell us who you are, what you do.
Such a big question. Let me make it super simple and short. So I am a teacher of money, manifestation, and mindset. I really focus on money and wealth for women. I got into it kicking and screaming. I won't lie to you. One moment, I never honestly thought that I would be teaching about money. If you asked me 20 years ago, I'd be like, you're a crazy person for thinking so. But I just kept getting the call saying like, you need to talk about money. You need to talk about money. Went through a lot of imposter going, who the heck am I to talk about this? And I've been doing it for a few years now, and I get stronger and more confident every single time I talk about it. It's a topic I'm super passionate about, and the more conversations I have, even just in general with family and friends, shows that we don't talk about money enough. There's a lot of misinformation, and I'm really obsessed with getting not just the right information, because like right is depending on the person, but getting truthful information and getting really foundational knowledge into the hands of amazing people.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I love that. And now I'm super curious. You're going to have to tell us, how did this get started? How did you officially made the leap into now I'm doing this and I'm starting this business and I'm talking about it? Walk us through the history there.
Walk us through the kicking and screaming.
Yes.
So historically, I'm an interior designer. I trained formally as a designer and had a business in a few different cities doing that. I got really burnt out after about 5 years and decided to make a shift. So I moved into tech, which had everybody that I knew kind of like craning their necks because they're like, how does tech have anything to do with interior design? And it doesn't, but it was working with entrepreneurs. And it gave me time to settle out my income because being an entrepreneur, income can vary a lot. And it was during my time there, like it gave me a space to start to consider, what do I want next? I knew that I wasn't someone who wanted to be employed with a company forever, but I needed some time to heal and to ground. So about the beginning of 2022, I was setting my intentions, like as 2021 was coming to a close, what do I want the next year to look like? And I kept kind of getting this little like nudge about starting to lean into the topic of money. And I've been studying money for more than 20 years, primarily with the focus of like, how do I improve my financial life? I did an experiment in my sort of mid-30s where I said, I'm going to, for 1 year, just study money, not with the impact of like trying to change my life, but just to understand it better. Okay. And it really opened me up to learning about money differently. And I learned a crap ton that year. So then 2022 rolled around. was doing really well in my work. I'd been promoted twice in less than 2 years. I was absolutely killing it by every metric. But this voice would not stop coming to me saying, please talk and teach about money. And I finally said, I sort of threw up my hands and said, okay, if I'm going to be this person that's supposed to teach about money, like I need to understand, what are people wondering about? Is there even some like interest? So I reached out through my company and said, is there anybody willing to sit down and talk with me just candidly about your journey about money? And those conversations were really enlightening. It was super fun to start them because everybody was like, what's the point of this conversation? I said, I don't actually know where I'm going with this, but I want to understand. I keep getting this annoying call and I'm finally like, all right, what do you want from me? And that's when I started to understand that everybody's experience with money is very different. But what I really saw, what stood out to me so strongly from those conversations, I was talking with professionally successful women in a very male-dominant industry. So tech is very male. And they were killing it. They were absolutely crushing it. They were leading giant teams. They were working in Canada and Ireland and like all over the place. And each of them had their own insecurity when it came to money. Now, these are women who not only were professionally successful, they'd bought houses, they'd paid for the university. Some of them had helped spouses get out of debt, like a ton of financial wins, and still were really struggling. And what I realized was that my skill wasn't specifically necessarily in knowing all of the things about money, but it was in talking openly and sharing openly about money. And that's really where my strength comes from. So once I started to put those two pieces together, I was like, okay, I get why you're giving me this call. Fine, I'll take it up. So fast forward a little bit of time, I left my job in the last quarter of 2023 to officially launch into my business and spent 2 months utterly exhausted, could not function. And the beginning of 2024, I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. We need to get going. So once I finally like healed and grounded and came back more into myself, I thought I was going to write a program about leaning into your personal power. And the universe had a totally different idea. It was like, no, Dolly, you're going to be writing a program about money. And it just flowed through me. So that's the program that has turned into what is now called Building Fempires. And it's really teaching this foundational knowledge about money, helping people understand the beliefs and understand how their subconscious mind works. It's holding this specific reality in place. And honest to goodness, like it's been the most, I honestly never thought that I would be doing this work, but it is so fulfilling and joyful. And it's so funny because a lot of what I see on social media, people say like, talk about money and just get ready to be attacked. And I'm like, that's not my experience. But I just want so much to get good information in the hands of good people.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing the journey and also for being vulnerable to talk about the not so fun parts that we all go through, right? For some reason, we think we need to be embarrassed while we're all going through it, right? I hear this voice and I start talking to people and I don't even know what I'm doing. And I'm losing my mind starting a new business. And I think I need to do this, but I'm actually going to do something else. Like we're all going through this in some shape or form, regardless of how established we are. By the way, whether we're just starting a new business or we're tweaking things inside the business that's already established, it's almost like you're starting from scratch, but you're not. And then the imposter syndrome that you touched on, like there's all of it, all of the time in different ways. So thank you for being open.
Yeah, I want to just add on to that. I had a really fascinating meditation reflection this morning that taps into this so perfectly. So as someone who's like constantly learning about money, I'm always trying to unpack beliefs about money. And I realized this morning that I had this belief that had nothing to do about money. It was entirely related to how I saw myself showing up in my business. And I realized that there was this belief and it's anchored in and it's still perpetuated by lots of teachers of like business and entrepreneurship that says, in order for you to be taken seriously, you need to have years and years and years of experience. You need to have all these degrees and certifications and all this proof behind you. And what came through in that reflective session was that this historical story has been perpetuated by people who are insecure and want to limit the competition in their fields. And when I realized that, I was like, oh my God, I've been hanging on to this garbage story for so long and keeping myself small. And what I love about what's happening in the world right now is there are a lot of entrepreneurs, and I really want to celebrate women because I think women, sorry guys, I think women do this better. We're willing to just go, fuck it, like let's try it out. Yeah. Let's see how this goes. I know I can't keep ignoring this call. I have to get this out there and I'm going to trust that I'm going to land in the right place. And that's really huge for us to do that.
Oh my gosh, that is so true and such a big insight. I keep going back to whatever meme it was that I don't even know if it's a quote by somebody. I mean, it must be, but it's always in my mind when I feel that imposter syndrome or that I'm not good enough. Even when there's a billion people telling me, you're great. And there's confirmation here and there. It's like, what will it take for us to believe in ourselves? And the quote is, there are people less qualified than you making a bigger impact. And it's because of exactly what you just said. They just said, I'm going to go and I'm going to do and see what happens, as opposed to let me spend years getting all of these degrees and then doing nothing. And I've been experiencing a lot of that as I shift more into my music as well. Because every time you're starting something new, it's natural to be like, there's other people out there doing this and they've been doing this for years. Who am I to step in here? Except we're all unique and we bring something new to the table. Now, something I wanted you to touch on that I think is so interesting, especially since the podcast is geared toward women. I have guy listeners out there as well that are very supportive of the show as well. But since the focus is women entrepreneurs, women that are building these businesses, what are some of the differences that you see in terms of the mindset around money and the insecurities? And what are the origins of that? Loaded question, but go for it.
Oh my goodness. All right. How do I make this nice and short and sweet? So one of the very first things, and this actually doesn't matter whether you're an entrepreneur or you're an employee, because of how we're socialized so differently from birth, men are socialized really that earning a good salary and taking care of their family, whatever that looks like, is their duty. And women are taught a whole bunch of other things that have nothing to do with earning money.
Right.
So one of the first things that I really notice is that because of this, men tend to see money as a tool. And women see this as a thing that they need to do a ton of work in order to be worthy of deserving it. Now, that may not sound like a very big difference, but when it comes to how we actually show up in our business and in our work and in our careers, it makes an enormous difference. It's why I see so often that a guy will show up at work or in business and be unapologetic about the salary that he's after, the sales that he's landing, the revenue that his business is generating. Whereas women feel like they need to explain it. They need to prove that they deserve it. They need to prove that they have value for it. And we are taught that the amount of money that we receive is directly related to the value that we put out into the world. And that actually also showed up in my reflection this morning. And I was like, how is that possible? Because there are people who are making hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that are putting no value into the world. So that then can't be true. Because we're taught this, and women are taught so many terrible things about how do we prove value? Well, we need to be valuable by being beautiful, by being of service, by making sure that everybody's taken care of. That's really difficult to balance then in the scope of having our business. So that's a really big one to start. The other thing is that because men are socialized really that it's their duty to go after money, they feel no shame about building it. Whereas women have a tremendous amount of shame and guilt about money. And I'll highlight a really simple example. So if you've been learning about money at all in the last 10 or 20 years, Marta, you've probably heard people talk about stop buying the $5 coffee, right?
Yeah.
Stop buying the shoes. This is a message that's really taught to women in particular, more so than guys. And what it does is it shames us for our choices. But what I want to add into this is context. So after World War II, the economy was really struggling. And the US government did something to boost the economy. It's how things like credit cards and loans and consumer credit became a thing. It was intended to boost spending to get the economy going. Women are the primary decision makers in the household for spending decisions. So we've been socialized for 60 years that our civic duty is to make sure that we keep the economy going. Well, how do we do that? We do that through fast fashion. We do that through buying things for the home. We do that through, beauty and makeup products. That's all helping the economy. But by the same side, we're also shamed for doing those things. So we have this really messed relationship with money. And as entrepreneurs, it gets really tricky because you cannot have a business unless it's making money. But how do you then make sure that you feel worthy and deserving of this money? It gets really kind of tricky. So it's a big difference that I see between men and women in particular as it relates to money, whether it's through entrepreneurship or through a career, or even if it's like a spouse or one spouse is a stay-at-home spouse. It's very fascinating to see the difference between the two.
Yeah. Oh, wow. This is just really, really fascinating. Because at times when we get into like the social makeup and how women, the things that you were talking about, right? How women were raised and all of those things throughout the years. At times we can get into like feminism or topics that are not necessarily even related to this. And oftentimes I have to say this in the show or when I go somewhere else and people ask me, what is women empowerment then? Because I have 2 sons. I'm happily married. I'm not against men, right? But there are differences and there are things that have affected us through generations. And you are so right. When you are an entrepreneur, you bring all those things through and it doesn't really match the growth of the business, what it takes to grow the business. And you're like, I don't understand why this thing's not going. Something must be wrong with me. So this awareness is key. And I love the way that you brought it up and how you explained it. That is very, I think, different from what I had heard before. So I appreciate you sharing that and how this awareness can make a huge shift.
Hey, let me ask you a question. Would you like to be my next guest on the Empowered Woman podcast? Do you have a story you'd like to share? Want more visibility for your business on a show ranked in the top 0.5% in the world? Well, then head on over to martasperk.com/podcast guest for more information.
Now, let's talk about, this has to do with the way that women have been treated and just our general knowledge. But in general terms, finances, numbers, the regular person is like, I don't want to look at a spreadsheet. I will hire somebody. Like, I don't even want to look at what stocks mean. Like, this is way in over my head. Let me get somebody else here that's experienced or talk to my spouse or someone else. What do you make of that? Is that something by design so that women are not in the loop? Or why are we, is that part of, how we were raised so that it's like, this is not for you. You're not meant to understand this. So just deal with the fact that you're not going to know. Like, tell us more.
Yeah. So let me first say all financial products. And when I say financial products, like already I can hear some people's eyes glaze over. A financial product is literally cash, credit cards, loans, investments, anything that is like something related to money. Okay. So a financial product in and of itself, like the history of money itself, literally just started because there got to be too many humans on the planet that we couldn't just barter or exchange. It got to be too complicated. So humans are really ingenious people. We came up with the solution. Hey, what if we have this neutral thing that if you give me this thing, I'll give you this many of that. You can use it otherwise. That's all it is. It means nothing about us. It has no emotion. It's just, that's all it is. As the world has evolved, of course, we've gotten more complicated tools and things. And I used to be terrified of investment. Now, it was a double-edged sword because I'd always been learning about money, was told that like I should be investing from the moment I turned 18. But everything was really, really complicated. I'm like, I don't even understand what the stock market is. And I mentioned earlier that like one of my special skills is that I will just lean into anything and everything with open and honesty. And like, I just want to understand. So that's how I started learning about the stock market. Now I'm blessed with a spouse who knows a lot and is like really great at explaining things. So I just kept asking him questions. And then I started asking other people questions. And what I realized as I started to really understand things that seem really complex, like investing, even like a credit card. Oh my gosh, nobody told me anything about credit cards when I started, Marta. Like literally I was told, you're 18, apply for a credit card because they're guaranteed to give it to you. That's it. That was all I was told. I was like, okay. So it's no wonder that like suddenly I'm 18 and I'm in consumer debt because I didn't know how to handle this tool. It's like someone said, here's a hammer, go nuts. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this thing. Am I breaking windows? Am I, building a house? Like, what do I do? What I found is that if you really like dig into it, financial products are written and explained in a way that seems really complicated, but it actually is very simple. Now, I will color that by saying there are some like edge cases, especially when we I'm going to like broad stroke investing. There are some things in there that are inordinately complicated. And it's kind of like, imagine that you're a doctor. If you're a doctor and you're a GP, you know the human body really well, you know how to like check for symptoms, but you also understand where your knowledge ends. So you're not going to, if you're a GP, you're not going to then try to go do neurosurgery. That's not your expertise. It's not your skill. That's not even anywhere close to like what you would do. You would refer somebody away. What has happened in the financial industry is that they've made all of the pieces that we use in a day-to-day seem so complicated that we need to always go to the air quotes neurosurgeon. So the professionals, the banks, the financial advisors, all those things in order to just make simple changes or make simple decisions. The problem with that is I have nothing against financial professionals. We need those people, of course. The problem is that it takes our power away from us. And this is one of the main things that I really saw coming through those conversations that I had with the women earlier that I mentioned. These were like above average intelligence women who are very successful and unafraid to stand in these big arenas. But when it came to their money, a number of them said, like, I just do what my financial advisor tells me to do. I don't know how to handle this, so I let my husband do this, or I let whoever it is handle this. Now, what I do want to say is, because I felt so overwhelmed when I first started learning, like, oh my God, so now I need to know everything there is to know about money and who's got the time and interest for that. That's not the case at all. And that's why when I teach about tools, I teach about here's what you need to know in its simplest form. That's it. Once you get beyond that, yes, absolutely work with a professional, but have the foundation so that you can understand what they're saying. And I know that we like to say money isn't everything, and that's true. It's not everything, but everybody needs it. And I saw this fascinating comment on social media last week that said, stop telling people that money is power. Money has nothing to do with power. And I'm like, are we living in the same world right now? Are you aware of what's happening?
Yeah.
When we give up our power around our own money, we give up our power in a lot of different things. So it's meant to be complicated because if it's complicated, it's gatekept. Just by adding like a little bit of knowledge and doing it a little bit over time and practicing with those tools and trying to understand a little bit better, it builds a huge amount of foundation for all of us.
Which goes back to what you were saying that came up in your meditation earlier today about keeping people, about the imposter syndrome. It's a way of keeping insecure people stuck because then we'll just have less competition. If more people were encouraged to be confident in themselves, it would be a very different world and that many people wouldn't want to be. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, tell us more about your program, because now I'm super curious to see how you blend in this very practical, black and white, should I say, knowledge of money that you're telling us it is important. Don't just rely blindly on anyone, not because those people are not experts and they're not going to give you good advice, but because you're in charge of your life and your money and you should know these things. But then you bring in the manifestation. And I've had so many different conversations about manifestation here on the show. And I always like to bring in the edge of manifestation doesn't mean just sit there and kind of dream about it and everything's going to fall in your lap, which I assume is not your view based on everything you have said. So tell us more about the program and how you work with clients.
So the Building Empires program is a 7-week core program. Within those 7 weeks, I give you a taste of the history of money. And the reason I focus a little bit on the history of money right at the start is that there's 2 pieces inside those 2 modules that created massive unlocks for me. And I'll give you a little teaser on one of them. One of them was understanding that women did not have independent access to money until the 70s or 80s. I just want to reiterate that. The 70s or 80s. I don't know about you, Marta. I was born in the 80s. Like, you know, it's when I understood that, it just released a huge amount of like beliefs and stuck energy that I've been feeling because I felt like, why am I so broken? I can't seem to figure this out. So I touch a little bit on the history. Then I talk about what money actually is. And I explain, I think it's like 5 or 6 of like the main financial tools that we use every day. Things like loans, credit cards, lines of credit. I talk about investing. I break down the simple elements of like what the stock market is, how to get started investing. Very clear that there's like no financial advice because I have to be very careful about that. And I talk a little bit about our credit score as well. So these are all normal tools that all of us use day to day, but because they seem so overwhelming, we tend to ignore them, right? And just like a medical conditioning, ignoring it isn't going to help. We want to actually understand it. So I keep it simple, I keep it fun, I keep it tangible so that you can easily take that information in and not feel overwhelmed. Then I talk about the subconscious mind and our beliefs. And the reason that that is paired into the program, every single thing that exists in our life exists because we believe it must be. And that's a truth that when I first heard that, I wanted to punch the person in the face and said that to me. I was like, excuse me, what? Like, there's a lot of pain and hurt in my life that I don't believe that I've generated in.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, oh, I learned a crap ton through that. So yeah, totally get it. And this is where the manifestation piece comes in. So I think that we have this sort of mistaken idea that manifestation is something, like you said, you sit on the couch and you visualize it and just falls into your lap, or that it's like super woo-woo, or that only a few people can do it. All of us are manifesting every single minute of every single day. And it doesn't matter whether you're awake or you're asleep, we're constantly manifesting things in. And the very simplest way to say that is everything that you are thinking about and that you're putting emotion behind is what you're creating into your reality. So to kind of give you an example, it's why when you're feeling really good and you're like, that's so sexy today, like I feel really good about myself, you'll notice people around you act differently to you. And you'll notice things are like flowing in. You're like, I don't know what's going on today, but like, I just feel like everything's coming my way because your thoughts and your emotions are pulling that in. Or on the other side, if you're having a really shitty day and you're like in traffic, you're just like, why is everybody out to get me today? Because it's all responding. That's manifestation. That's as simple as it gets. So I talk about the subconscious mind and explain very simply, like, here's what it is. Here's why it's really important to understand. And I walk folks through a process of how to uncover their limiting beliefs and how to shift them. When I first heard about limiting beliefs, I was like, oh my God, how am I ever going to change my life? They're unconscious. How do I know how to fix it? Mm-hmm. And with a little bit of awareness and some practical strategies, which is everything that's in my program I've tested and I know works, we can uncover those and shift those actually pretty easily. What I'm doing now is I'm adding 3 bonus modules into the program because what I realized was this initial program gives people a really great shift into building that foundational knowledge that's key to building like financial awareness. They're starting to shift their beliefs and those beliefs are creating the reality that they want. But I realized that because I'm focusing on women, there was 3 topics that I was missing: freedom, confidence, and navigating financial gaps. We can have the strongest mindset when things are good, but when our income dips, where it completely vanishes, things are not going the way that we want, that's when we really like have that rubber meets the road kind of moment. And that's a challenging space for any of us to go through. So I wanted to build into those spaces, show women, and really give tangible ways to like build confidence in life, because confidence is everything. One of the things that I realized, building my financial knowledge gave me a tremendous amount of confidence, which allowed me to show up more fully when I was having conversations with credit card companies or banks or, whatever. So all that ties in. It's all online, so you can go through at your own pace. It's 7 weeks, but like you could go through it more quickly or more slowly if you want to. And the idea is at the end, you come out with solid knowledge. Money isn't scary to you anymore. You understand how to use the tools. And you now have like shifted beliefs to create this really amazing reality, whatever that looks like for you. For some of us, we're going hard after many millions. And some people are like, I just want to put my kids through college, or I want to buy my house. None of those are bad. It's whatever makes sense for you.
Mm-hmm. That is so cool. It sounds amazing. Thank you for walking us through it. And we'll make sure and put the link in the show notes so people can check out more information on that. It sounds very comprehensive. And I love that you include the history. That is fascinating. I love history of all things, but especially when you're talking about the importance of understanding it, right? When you're banging your head against the wall and you're like, I don't get it. Well, then let's go and look at the basics and understand it. And then look at how it has affected you, which you bring in the common denominator in the story, which is you and your history around money and all that. And I think many programs that talk about money kind of start there, as opposed to understanding how did it get to be that through the history of humankind. So I love that piece. That's awesome. Well, before I have you share with us where you hang out the most and where people can find more information about you, I'm going to ask you my $1 million question. I love when I'm talking to money people because it's like, it's even more relevant.
Hit me.
Amy, what is an empowered woman then?
What is an empowered woman? I could talk about this for 30 minutes.
No.
All right. To me, an empowered woman is someone who knows herself. She is confident in who she is. She's constantly curious about the world. Her intent always is to create a better world, supportive of people around her, 0% interested in like cutting down people in the effort of going what they want, and really champions for other humans, regardless of age, gender, race, whatever. Empowered women are the women that like, they're irresistible. You just want to hang out with them because you feel good when you're with them. You always learn something when you're done. Yeah, that's probably, let's keep it there. I think that's a good
that is
description.
wonderful. I love it so much. And I just remembered, I was going to ask you how people can connect with you, but I do know you have a podcast, you have a free resource. Walk us through all the things.
Cool. So one of the easiest ways to connect with me is on the Manifesting Millions podcast, which you can find on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Of course, I am on the socials. I am 100% honest that like social media is not like 100% my jam. So I do my very best, but I am on Instagram primarily. I have a free resource that is really fantastic. And I just want to front it by saying there's this quote that I've heard attributed to a few different people that says, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask. So in that vein, I have a freebie that's called 8 Questions to Instantly Shift Your Financial Reality. And inside that freebie, you'll find, and these are not the normal questions. You're not going to find a question in there that says like, what was your dad's relationship with money? And what was your mom's relationship with money? These are different questions, but they're intended to help you really uncover where are you at with your finances right now? How do you feel about money? And build some awareness. And then there's 2 bonus questions in there to help, like, you can take this into your day-to-day life, because my intent really is to help you create shift right away. I know you're going to link the URL in the show notes, but it's always amyvanmeijl.com. And you'll find all the links to all those things in there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. This was such a fun conversation, so informational, very insightful as well. Lots of food for thought there. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Marta. I loved it.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope this episode empowered you. And if you enjoyed the show, please join the Empowered Woman community on Facebook and share with friends or leave a review on iTunes so more people can discover this empowering message. Until next time, bye.